Hey guys, welcome to Worth the Spin. Hope you enjoyed my previous video. Hope you like this one, and hope you like any going forward. If you do, like the video, and maybe even subscribe, and you'll know when I put new stuff up. Because I never know when I'm going to get it done and get it put up. I think I'm on a 30 take at this at the moment, so I don't know how much longer it might be before this one's finalized and put up. I might need to subscribe to my own channel so I know when I'm putting videos up. So we're going to talk about two albums today. We're going to talk about the first UK release, and we're going to talk about the first American release. Let's get right to it. I'm trying to keep these videos within a 15-18 minute limit because that's my attention span for these things. So that's the reason I'm doing that. Alrighty, Please Please Me, released March 22nd, 1963. There is 14 tracks on here, 6 cover songs, 8 originals. 2 singles were originally released from it. Love Me Do, P.S. I Love You, and Please Please Me, and Ask Me Why. It has the famous Angus McBean cover, and I love this cover. This was taken in outside EMI in London, and as many of you may know, a few years down the road there was another picture taken of older Beatles with long hair and beards for the Get Back sessions, which turned into the Let It Be sessions. And for you few who may not know, you can also see that picture on the cover of the Beatles 1967 through 1970. This is a mono copy. It's not a first pressing, it's a fourth pressing. Couldn't afford a first pressing, but I hope to down the road. Just because it would be cool to own the very first pressing of the very first Beatles album ever to be released. As a Beatle fan, you know, that's the thing, you know. You have to own that. You have to be able to say, I have the first pressing of the first album they ever did. And I think as a collector, as collectors, that's what we do. You know, we have these holy grails, and we run around the earth and scour those holy grails up and take them home and wow, look, and put it on the shelf, and there it sits till the next holy grail, and we start to process all over again. So the original first pressing of this album on the gold and black label is one of the holy grails for me. But there are several holy grails in the Beatles catalog I would love to own. One being the Butcher cover. Seen one time in person, and this lady brought it into a local record store I go to, and they tried to rip her off. Listen, it is what it is. They tried to rip her off for it, and she said, "Nah, I'll just keep it." And it was a great condition cover, and she had quite a few in her. She also had a lot of early Rolling Stones pressings, and they were just wanting to give her nothing for them, and she's like, "I'll just can't keep them." And but I seen it, and it was nice to be able to see one, especially in the condition it was in, because it looked like they just bought it. So you don't see very many Butcher covers like that anymore. Alrighty, so back to what we're talking about. Please Please Me. One of the neat things about this, there's not a lot to talk about this album as far as alternate covers and songs and things of that nature, but one of the neat things on here, and if you look at the writing, if you can see the writing credits on here, it is McCartney and Lennon. They hadn't really finalized how they wanted to put things down on paper or record, shall we say, at the time. So they went with McCartney and Lennon. Later they changed it to Lennon and McCartney because they felt it sounded better, rolled off the tongue a little easier. But I think either way, it would have been perfect the way it was. Stereo version of this has a slightly different pressing of Please Please Me. There's a flubbed line in it that is on the stereo version that was not on the mono version. And that's because the Beatles spent a lot of time on the monos. They wanted the monos to be perfect. That was the popular format at the time, was mono. Stereo was more for your more adult collectors who had the money to buy a stereo system. Most record collectors in the early 60s couldn't afford a stereo, so they had monos. So groups spent a lot of time on recording their stuff in mono instead of stereo. stereo back then was what he called fake stereo. So fake stereo is when you take a couple of items from your and run them down your right channel. Let's say vocals and drums coming from the right, and then you come over to your left channel, your left speaker, and you would get guitars and trampoline, whatever, trumpets, stuff of that nature would come out of the left. You put some reverb in there, and that kind of blended them together. So that reverb helps stretch that music. And I'm not a very technical guy, so I'm not explaining it in a more technical manner. But basically, that reverb helps spread that out a little bit. But if you were on the right side of the room, you would hear just vocals and piano or whatever from there. And if you travel the other side of the room, you would get kind of an echo, a faint sound of the vocals that you could barely make out, and then mainly your guitars and whatever coming from that speaker. So you had to have your system set up perfectly in order to take advantage of that stereo effect. All mine are monos. I prefer mono because that's the way the Beatles recorded them. That's how they wanted you to hear them. They spent a lot of time to make these things sound good in mono. So I think that's the format you should listen to it in. 2 singles from this album, Love Me Do and P.S. I Love You. I don't have that single, nor do I have Please Please Me and Asking Me Why, which was the second single from here. Singles from albums were a rare thing for the Beatles. They wanted to do new stuff all the time, whether it be a single or an album, so you got value for your money. That being said, they also did a couple of other singles in 1963 that are not album cuts. Let's take a look at those real quick. Those we have are From Me to You, backed with Thank You Girl. We also have She Loves You, backed with I'll Get You. And at the time, you could only get these songs on these singles and not on an album. And I think that's so awesome that they would think that, that way. I don't want to make a ton of money, which they did anyway, off of this stuff. I just want to get the fans value for their listening pleasure. And that's really cool. There were 2 EPs released in '63 that came along with the Beatlemania. These are different, as in they are from the album and not just single cuts. So EPs were a more affordable way for your teenage fans to get some music off of an album without paying an album price back then, because not a lot of teenagers could afford an album. So they would buy singles and the EPs. So if your singles are going to have stuff that's not on your album, and you still got fans who can't afford that album to hear that music that's on there. So EPs were a more affordable way of doing that. So this is our first one, and this is one of my favorite covers on these EPs. This is Twist and Shout, and I love that cover. You had Twist and Shout and A Taste of Honey on one side, followed by Do You Want to Know a Secret, and There's a Place on the other side. So if you were a teenage fan and couldn't afford the album, you got 4 songs off of that album right there. But if you waited a few months later, you also got this beauty, Beatles Hits. And that contains From Me to You, Thank You Girl, Please Please Me, and Love You Do. And you can see the back of it there. And up to this point in September, we're still going with the McCartney and Lennon instead of Lennon McCartney. So that's kind of cool. So I love the EPs also. Alright, so that was the first exposure of the Beatles in the UK. Let's fly across the sea to America. We got, not that album, we got this one here. This is Introducing the Beatles. Introducing the Beatles, as you may or may not know, is considered the most bootleg album in history. There was 1.3 million copies of this album sold by BJ when it came out, and it was on the market pretty much for less than a year. There's 2 versions of this. One version contains Please Please Me and Ask Me Why before restraining order came in because they didn't have the rights to release those songs. So they demanded that they be removed, which they did, and they replaced them with Love Me Do and P.S. I Love You. So you can find two versions of this thing. This is an album that you go to your local record store, you may or may not find. They're not crazy about it because there's so many bootlegs of it out there. And it's kind of hard to sell it at a higher value than most Beatle albums. So not a lot of stores really worry about when it comes in if they buy it. I've been told if I get a collection of records and it's in there and it's cool, I'll sell it. But if you come in here to me and say, hey, I want to sell this, I'm going to give you a couple dollars maybe. There's just so many versions and it's not an album that really sells. So this is the front cover. And this is also fake. This is stereophonic, but this is also fake. There are some true stereo copies out there. I think the number I saw was like 30,000 true stereo copies that were made of this album. Otherwise, it's the fake stereo versions. And this is the front cover here. Alright, and this is the back. And I have the first version. I don't have the second version. It's one I need to pick up. But there's no hurry on that. Alright, so this was hot here in America. So VJ was a company that was failing financially. And most American companies didn't want to sign the Beatles on because guitar bands were on the way out. And they weren't interested in wasting money and time trying to produce albums by them. VJ said, we'll take the chance. We need the money. Paid off for them in the short run. In the long run, they still wound up going out of business due to really bad financial decisions. And so again, this album's pretty easy to get. And so you also have multiple versions of the label. Kind of variants. You can get it with the capital color rainbow and then a black label. And also there's the black label, which is the first release. It doesn't have the brackets around the VJ like this one does. And then there are the rainbow label ones where you have different versions. Some of them, their colors on a rainbow are washed out. Some of them are not. Some of the labels are like half labels. I've seen them where it looks like the label's been cut in half and it's not pasted on the album right. There was no real quality control to this thing. It was just a quick buck for VJ. But it's still a good album. And everything that's on here you could get. They wound up releasing the early Beatles, which contains all of the music that's on here. So if you missed this initial release, you could pick it up on Beatles for Sale. In the UK and America was the early Beatles. So it's a good album. A lot of good stuff on here. If I was a fan in the early 60s, I would have snagged it up like everybody else. Alrighty. There's, I think one single was released off of that, which I don't have. And I think that was, I think Love Me Do. I'm not 100% sure. My Beatle knowledge should be better than it is. But in these later years, I find myself not always remembering everything as well as I remembered when I was younger. So, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Moving forward, pretty much want to do the same thing. I want to take the UK version and compare it with the American version. There's a thing that I like to call Beatles soup. And that's where you take a collection of a British album, British singles, match them together, take some stuff off, throw it on a big pot, slap it on vinyl here in America on the Capitol label, and release it. I call that Beatles soup because it's just kind of a mixture of different songs that were not released on the same album. And that's one of the things also, if you're early into collecting the Beatles. And I've come across some people lately that I'm just getting into the Beatles, just buying the albums. What do you suggest? And I'm like, I love to talk to people like that because then I can impart my knowledge that's probably 99% right and not have them go, what are you talking about? So Either way, if you buy either of these albums, they're worth your money. They're worth your time. They're great albums to have in your collection. I have seen people say they have originals of this VJ release, but I don't believe them. I think the originals that are out there are 1% actual originals, and the other 99 are the bootlegs. Again, it was the most bootleg produced Beatles album ever. Most bootleg produced album, period, of any band. So it's very interesting. And you'll find many, many different labels when you're looking. I've been in one record store and found probably 8 different labels at a time before. So it's an interesting hunt. Will I ever own an original? Probably not. Do I care? No. Not on that. My focus is on the British releases. That's what I want. As far as original pressings, is the UK ones. They sound the best to me, and especially the monos, and that's the version I prefer to collect. So, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you'll join me for my next video. Give this a like if you liked it. Subscribe maybe. Again, I might need to subscribe myself so I know when I'm putting these videos up, because I can't even keep it straight anymore. So, again, hope you enjoyed it. Hope to see you next time. Thanks a lot.